So, what was it like working on this film?
Hi, Dave Cass. I'm here to read for the part of McDonald.
I was a model, and I was on a location booking in Cannes. I got a call from my agent in New York, and they said a producer, director called wanting to give a screen test. I told this at lunchtime to the editor who was with us on this shooting, and I said that there's a producer who wants to give me a screen test in Hollywood, and they all had a big laugh about that.
Wow. I know that it was a reading, and I went for the reading, and I just recall your dad saying yes, something like that. Yes, he's fine. And I didn't understand that at the time, but I went out, and then I understood that I got this wonderful role.
You have the unusual distinction that this was not your first film with the Laughlin family. You go back to Billy Jack.
Los Angeles used to host something called the Battle of the Bands in Hollywood Bowl. And my sisters, Pat and Vicky, sang in that contest, and they won vocalist division. They got on an album. We did not find out until much later that Tom Laughlin had acquired that album, was pulling talent for this movie, and really for vocals. But when he saw my sisters and their look, they had the particular ethnic look he was looking for, casting for Billy Jack. He pulled them to be cast in the movie. Master Gunfighter, I was called to an audition, and the audition was to read. There was a couple of scenes that Tom wanted to hear me cold read, and it really surprised me, and I was not really prepared for them. And as a matter of fact, I thought I did really poorly, and I was a little upset that I messed up. I really thought, that's it, I blew it, and then come to find out, I actually got the role.
Henry Wills was the stunt coordinator, and Henry brought me in to read, suggested that I meet Tom and read for this part. It was like yesterday. I remember going to the office, I think it was Culver Studios in Culver City. They took me in this big office. It was a big office with a desk. You remember that desk?
Yes, I do.
And a chair sitting right in front of the desk.
Right.
And if I remember right, that was almost all the furniture that was in that room.
There was a couch.
There was a couch, but you weren't allowed to sit in the couch. You had to sit in front of Tommy. And basically, he asked a couple of questions and then allowed you to talk. And at that time, I knew he was very intense and passionate about this project that he was about to make.
When my dad made Billy Jack, I was 13, and because he was the producer, the star, the director, the writer of the film, he didn't have anyone to help him with his performances. I became kind of his eyes and ears while he was doing his performances on the film. And it turned out that I guess I had kind of a knack for it and actually helped him in a few scenes and changed things around a bit from what he was initially going to do, and they ended up being in the film. On Trial of Billy Jack, I got to direct some of the segments of the film. So when this film came up, my dad had pretty much had his fill of being the director of the film as well. It was pretty hard to star and direct. And so it kind of, I don't even remember how it came to be that I was going to direct the film. Oh, go ahead, say anything. We can edit it out.
No, I'm not going to say anything.
Come on.
One of the things that strikes me the most as I sit here and remember is the cast. I'm now over your shoulder looking at a little of the film, and the cast was just such a wonderful cast.
CBS Studio Center on Radford used to have a back lot, and it was a Western street. We used it for more Wild Wild West and Gunsmoke sometimes. It was a Western street right in the middle of the lot. If you rode your horse too far on one end of the street, you ended up at the stoplight at Colfax. I challenged Tom Laughlin to a gunfight. So he killed myself, Dick Durock, and Fred Carson in about 1.5 seconds. He was early John Woo filmmaking is what it was.
There was a wonderful stunt woman, her name is Regina Parton. They had asked her to put on a big black wig, dress her up in the garb, and go ahead and have her go through the muddy street on the back of the horse, being dragged through the mud literally, and where Tom cuts the ropes. And she didn't look enough like me, unfortunately. all the way through. So they made me do it. And this was the funny thing. Yell action, and here goes the horse, and I'm being dragged through. And I thought it went well, and then when they yelled cut, everybody, including you, was laughing so hard. And I was, what's the big deal? Nobody wanted to tell me. Even Hector, Elias was laughing. I said, what happened? What happened? They said, well, just before, you know, when we went to action, the horse took a big dump and you got dragged right through it.
I was so insecure, you know, in the whole process.
Didn't show.
But I could see it, but thank you very much. But it was, you know, the fact that it was new and it was my first experience, you know, it's like one's first love. You know, you never forget your first love.
Let me give you a trivia that I'll never forget from that shoot. There was a USC Notre Dame game. We were right about Thanksgiving time. We were shooting there, and Notre Dame was out ahead by like 24 or 30 points. I don't remember exactly. It was over at the halftime, and just for the hell of it and for bonding, and I figured I'd charge it off to the picture. I bet a couple $100. Whoever would take a bet, I bet him that SC was going to beat him. And it was hopeless, beyond hopeless. So I got on, it was a little plane he had got me to fly down to the next location while you guys finished up there for a couple days. So I took off, and I get home. By the time I land, Anthony Davis, I'll never forget it, ran the opening second half kickoff for a touchdown, and SC went on to win. Well, from that day on, they all thought I had magic power.
All the main actors were in this long limousine, and I remember Barbara said she wanted to know, what is it that Maltese wants from Eula? And I'm sitting in the, we weren't introduced yet, and I'm sitting in the car, and I said, she wants to get in her pants. And there was a silence, and I turned to the actor on the side, and he was, and no one said anything. I turned around to Barbara, and she was seething, you know, which she held against me for a while until she really found out how I was and who I was, and that I was just a pain in the ass.
I got an ulcer. I actually remember that because we had a PA assigned to give me my Maalox every hour, so I didn't forget.
Costumes for Barbara and that jacket, it was just, I think those were just little masterpieces.
Patricia, yes, she did some very beautiful costumes. And what was amazing about her work was the details. Remember that coat that I wore at the end of the film?
Yes.
With that hat? The details on that coat was amazing. And I said to her, but they won't see all of this. She says, don't worry, it will all make it look beautiful.
Okay, this one's going to be tough.
Thanks to
He's
the expert.
he's pulling my chain already.
There was a part where I'm running, and two horsemen come and they pick me up between the two riders, and they take off with me. But when we stopped, the horses got too close to each other, and they're huge beasts, and they were crushing my ribs. They were crushing me in the middle, and your dad saved me. He just pushed me down, pushed me out of the way, and I would have been crushed. So you'd have to replace me.
Your dad was out of sight. We ran into a thing where it was Christmas time, the holidays, and I had already made plans to see my daughter in New York, and I went to Tom, and I told him this before, and he said, "Oh," and I found out that I was supposed to be shooting for Christmas, or something like that, and he worked it all out so that I could go to New York and see my daughter and come back and shoot the scenes that I was supposed to shoot I remember I love that. That was beautiful.
Oh, that's
You
great.
know, I never forgot that.
I have to tell a story here. This is the scene where
That's what we're here
they have Joanne Sosa and Hector Elias, and she's been cheating, and they're going to beat her up or whatever they're going to do. And I ride up and I interfere. My line was very simple. The one guy's going to take me on. I say, "I'm not a cowpuncher's son. I'm a professional. And I read that line, and I didn't like the way I read it. He said, Dad, it's perfect. It's perfect. Let's go. I said, give me another one. Give me another one. As I recall, I did like 22 of those. By the last one, you weren't even on the set anymore. You said, Dad, it's fine, but I'm telling you, we're going to use the first one. It's better. And you drifted back. You finally were standing back near the camera, and pretty soon you were way back. Whatever, perfect, Dad, it's perfect. And you used the first one.
He did the line, he's probably right, 25 times. And I wasn't as bad as he said. I didn't actually walk away. I just started conversing with other crew members, planning the next shoot that we were now behind schedule for, because Tom was still up there saying,
I'm not a cow puncher, I'm a professional.
He had the most intense eyes of any human being I've ever seen. It's a pet peeve of mine when you're talking to somebody on set and they're talking to you with their sunglasses on. I always take mine off. I want to see eyes. If Tom would call me over just to talk to me, I'd put my sunglasses on.
Another story that Lincoln Kilpatrick.
yes.
Well, we were on the last days of shooting. On a break, Lincoln came by with this new Cadillac. He said, when he catches Tom's face, he says, Tom, thanks for the present.
I had not ridden a horse in many, many years because I had a very bad accident as a child and I never had a nerve, didn't get right back on a horse, so I was psychologically damaged that way. And so it was the first time I got on a horse since I had an accident as a child. And then I had to learn how to ride side saddle. But I kept it all inside. I didn't let anybody know. I was traumatized. I didn't let it be known at all, but I was inside. I was traumatized to death.
Jack Marta was the cinematographer on this film, and he did several films for us. And we've had some great ones. We had Jimmy Crabe worked for me, who won an Academy Award for Rocky. We had Fred Konekamp, who was brilliant and wonderful and won an Academy Award for Patton, etc. But I never had anyone in my life like Jack Marta. I mean, he gave you the richest look, and no matter what you asked of him, and it was so fast. The first couple of days I thought, well, we're not going to have anything real good. He's going so fast. He's shooting like a quick TV show, which you're shooting in 7 days or something. But it was so fast, and the stuff was so rich and so lush.
Jack Marta, who is one of the classics in the business. He was a crusty old guy that seemed to not give a crap about anything, but he had a heart of gold, and the guy was as fast and as efficient as anybody I've ever worked with. One thing we haven't talked about is Lalo Schifrin, who is just a phenomenal composer. And I may be wrong, and if I am, damn me. But I do think this was the first film that he ever did a score for. And I think, my memory is that he barely spoke English. That it was almost like sign language, trying to talk to him to explain what we were looking for and the feel of the different scenes. My memory is that he had somebody there to help translate for when the sign language and everything else kind of broke down. He was very interested in bringing in some of the ethnic themes from the Indians and the drums, and we're sorry he couldn't be here today for these interviews.
It was a good show.
Yeah.
I think it was probably ahead of its time. It's like a Studebaker, It was different. If that picture was made today, it would have probably had much more acclaim than it had then.
I wanted to kind of break the Billy Jack mold so I wouldn't be stuck in that. And I thought to do a Western would be good. Now, tragically, I made choices as to how to play the character. And my son, who was directing it, was violently opposed to my approach. And that remained throughout the whole picture. He felt I was giving up what were my strengths, the naturalness, and so on and so forth, for the stylized, etc.
He sounds incredibly smart.
He was very right.
Tom has always been an advocate for human rights, not just for American Indians, for all humanity. He's always been the rebel and shown everybody, including Hollywood, taught them a few lessons, put it that way.
The heart and soul of this is the brutal treatment of the Indians, but what we added to it was a flip. You had not only the brutal treatment of the Indians by the Spanish, but then you had the Americans come in and treat the Spanish as if they are not human beings and set out to just wipe them out and destroy them. So you had the genocide of the Indians, or at least converting them to slave labor, and then you had the Americans come in and do the same to the Spanish. So that was the very crucial two themes of that picture.
These movies that Ton did, they just follow you everywhere because he was this rebel. He had this, not just a cult following, but there were the significant things that he said were true, and they stayed true.
You made this film independently with your own money?
Yes. Stupid, but we did. We did. There are some behind the scenes things that are very, very important about it. One, we made it with our own money. And two, the exhibitors owed us $11 million. Now, I think the picture, you can correct me, is made for around 3 or something like $3.5 million. Now, one of the things young filmmakers don't understand and young distributors don't understand is this is the only business in which you have a contract that has an automatic review. And the contract means we agree that we'll split 90-10 at the box office or 50-50, whatever it is. But when the picture plays, after it's played, the exhibitor comes back to the distributor, to the studio, and says, we got to review this contract. It didn't play as well as you said it was going to play, so I'm not going to pay you 70%, I'm only going to give you 40%. And they fight and they go through a review. So he won't pay you and he'll argue. But if you have another picture he wants, then you say, well, okay, fine, we won't give you Star Wars 2. That was the key. We didn't have another picture, and all we had was that picture. So what they turned around and did was just didn't pay us. So we got wiped out. That sent our company crashing. Not that the picture did badly. The picture did not do Billy Jack numbers, but the picture would have made a great profit for us and we'd have been fine. But the exhibitors refused to pay.
Yes, you. That was the curse of having been young, is I didn't fully understand the opportunity that this was. I didn't understand how important it was to do something with that right away. I actually, a funny story, Frank Wells was at the time the president of Warner Brothers Pictures, who was the company that ended up distributing this thing. He came over to my dad's house. Whoever was supposed to pick him up didn't pick him up, and blah, blah, blah. So I ended up driving Frank Wells back to his house in Beverly Hills. And Frank is checking me out, and I didn't realize at the time. I'm a 20-year-old kid driving the studio executive home, and try and make sure I stop at the stop signs. And he says, so how was the experience of making the film? I said, it was great, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't remember the question, but I remember there was one question, something like, do you think you could do it again? And it was like, in hindsight, I now know what that question meant. But at the time, it was like, yeah, I think I could. It was okay. It was like, duh, you want to listen to Aerosmith? Had I been as politically savvy as I was production savvy, I would have continued to make films. But I was a real dolt at the time and didn't understand the incredible honor and opportunity I'd been given in getting to make the film. And so, in all truth, it kind of pissed it away.
Locations were out of sight.
Yeah.
That Big Sur, the water, that rock with the hole in the middle.
There were certain rock formations that were hollowed out, and between the echoing of the waves, there was just a very haunting and in a beautiful way memory that I have of Carmel. And we got to meet Clint Eastwood, and he's really cool. I remember the Hog's Breath, I think that was a place up there. Tom had dinner and he introduced everybody.
The locations were very beautiful.
Weren't they?
They were very, very beautiful, the locations.
It was amazing, and I think a lot of that had to do with the Billy Jack film, in the sense that the people up there, and you would know better because you were out on the front lines, but the people trusted us and trusted our environmental sensitivities and that we were not a Hollywood company going to come in there and rip them off. And we promised that we would, you know, have it exactly the way we found it. So I think that had a lot to do with it.
I actually had a really nice compliment. One time he had Sidney Poitier over for dinner, he and his wife Joanne, and Sidney had, this was just after the film had come out, and Sidney came to me and he said it was the most beautiful Western he'd ever seen, which I took as a pretty nice compliment coming from Sidney Poitier.
What I loved is the final scene where Ron O'Neal and I have the big shootout was shot overlooking a Spyglass, I think, Spyglass golf cart. If you look real close, because you're using a long lens and it's kind of out of focus, you can see the greens and you can see the sand traps. But there are several of those where we shot off like the second or third hole. Ron O'Neal comes, at that scene, comes walking through some beautiful flowers, but it's the cart path from the second to third hole that he's riding his horse on.
Victor Paul, I think, was the guy who was training us on that. I enjoyed that a lot because once you put a sword in my hand, I thought I was Sinbad the Sailor. I was Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and all those people, and all the things that we did when we were young kids, like in the street without a sword, you'd fake it. And now I had a real one in my hand.
Victor Paul was then kind of the premier stuntman and teacher and so forth for sword fighting. He had done it for many, many years in films, all the great ones, the Errol Flynns and all those people. And he came in and he taught me. He staged, you know, the stuff, but it was frankly pretty easy because it's. Yeah, I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's pretty easy to be that corny, you know. You know, it's
Right.
That's easy to do, and then the fights roll.
Right.
And again, by the editing, it went so fast you don't know what you really saw. So all you had to do was do the, and then, and it was over.
They put a cable on me and a harness, and about 8 guys, half a block away, when he fired his shot, pulled my big ass through the air and splattered me in the mud, and I slid for like 10 feet. And I stayed down because I thought, oh God, let him print this one.
The only thing I don't like about the picture is my acting.
You ought to cut that.
Is there anything you want to say about this DVD or?
Let's see, about the DVD. I have to give thanks to the people at Ventura Distribution, the best independent video distributors and DVD distributors in the world. VenturaDistribution.com, because they're the people that are the motivating force behind making this DVD. And Larry and Cliff and all the guys over there, you guys are great. Oh, thank you. Dr. Rostock, and you can't really tell here, but we're in Dr. Maybe from that camera you can tell. You're here in Dr. Rostock, the best training facility on the planet, drrostock.com. Yeah.
This is Carlos.
Barbara Carrera, this is for you. We're sorry.
Excellent.
I'm interviewing me.